Page 17 in our books. Page 17 in our books, and if you want to open up your Bibles to Ephesians chapter 4. And brief recap. On Sunday, we talked about the importance of listening and self-reflection in a nutshell. That is an important, integral part of communication. If we are not willing to listen, if we are not willing to reflect on ourselves, then it's really hard to have that honest dialogue. When you're sitting back and you're having a conversation with someone and you just really have a hard time believing what they're saying. Not necessarily because they're saying anything outrageous or anything like that, but it's like sometimes you have to consider the source. And so in these instances, we have to be willing to reflect on ourselves to make sure that we aren't those kinds of people. But tonight we're going to try to finish up our talk on communication and why overall it's important in establishing healthy relationships, because they are built, a healthy relationship is built through honest, sincere, genuine communication, through ultimately controlled emotions, because that's what we're going to talk about. You're going to see there, or be angry and sin not, and godly speech. So all of these things that we're going to talk about this evening, always speaking the truth, be angry and sin not, and eliminate all corrupt speech. This is important for us to understand, because this is going to help encourage and strengthen our relationships. So let's get to this idea of always speak the truth. This is more than just don't lie. I don't think anybody in here would struggle with this idea, but sometimes that is the overall view of, well, as long as I'm just not outright blatantly lying, right? I'm not telling a bold-faced lie, then I'm safe. Good. Because we will pass off little white lies. We'll pass off, well, it's not that I lied, I didn't tell the whole truth. Right? So we give half-truths, which is just another way of lying. But I think what we ought to take from all of this, with the reality of always speaking the truth, is that, are we trustworthy? Are we trustworthy people? Think about the qualifications for elders. Does that man need to be trustworthy? Everybody's head should be bobbing up and down. Every last one of you. If he's not trustworthy, he's not elder material. I don't care how well he knows the scriptures. I don't care how good of a businessman he is. If you can't trust him any further than you can throw him, as Bugs Bunny says, it's no good. Why is trust so hard to rebuild once it's broken? What is it that we say about first impressions? I'm hearing whispers, but I can't hear what you're saying. They're what?
Worst.
Worst.
First impression's always the worst.
Yeah. But sometimes that's like, you got one shot, right? You have that one opportunity. Now, that's just with the idea of first impressions. But with some people, like, let's go beyond the idea of a first impression. You go beyond that, and when you break that trust, that was your one shot. That was your one opportunity with some people. Because some people, they do operate under the guise of, oh, I'll forgive you, but I ain't going to trust you. And you know, I mean, there's some wisdom in that, because you can rightfully forgive people. We have to forgive people. Forgiveness is given, but then trust is earned. And so if someone views us as not trustworthy, and you don't have that rapport within your relationship, why is it hard to rebuild trust? Past traumas, past problems. Sometimes it's because those people, they know exactly who you are and how you portray yourself, how you live your life. These things damage relationships. So, half-truths, manipulation. You ever heard this? Peacekeeping lies. We don't tell the full truth because we want to keep the peace. It's like, oh, don't tell Mom that I got a D in school, right? And then we say, well, at least it's passing. But it's like I said on Sunday, though, because we kind of got into the realm of talking about lying and whatnot. And it's like, I can handle the truth. Just tell me the truth. Now, here's the thing. Like, because I have a really good rapport with my kids, especially the two older ones, and I don't really have to say this to Logan, but I can tell, like if I'm having a serious conversation with Nathaniel, it's just like, please just tell me the truth. I can handle the truth. And I know when you're not telling the truth. And all of us parents, every last one of us, when it comes to our kids, we probably said something along those lines. Like, just tell me the truth. And then in the back of your mind, you already know what happened. But you just want to see, are they going to fess up to it? Are they going to own it? Now, maybe perhaps some of your kids were really good at hiding things. I don't know. I can't speak for all your kids. But I just know with me and mine, I'll tell them outright, I can handle the truth. We can get through it. It's not that, yes, the truth hurts sometimes. I get that. But we can get through that. What I'm not going to get through is when you lie and then I catch you in that lie. Or I've already caught you in it. It's just, I'm going to see if you're going to follow through with the lie. That's the area that it's like, I'm not going through that. We're going to do better. Excuses, giving false impressions. It kind of goes back to first impressions. Sometimes with first impressions, we give out false impressions. We don't show people who we really are. And so that is going to have an effect on whether or not people views us as trustworthy. Do we keep our word with what we say? Like, do we follow through? Or is there always an excuse? So I told you to turn to Ephesians 4. Drop down to verse 22. Verse 22. And here in Ephesians 4 and verse 22, we read that in reference to your former manner of life, you lay aside the old self, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lusts of deceit, and that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and put on the new self, which in the likeness of God has been created in righteousness and holiness of truth. And so I think the principle is that in Christianity, in learning the gospel, and applying these teachings to our lives, these things are going to change how we communicate. So here's the thing. Let's get back to the first impressions, back to whether or not you're trustworthy or not. Perhaps you were a person in your former life that was not trustworthy. You had developed a reputation as someone who, it's like, oh, don't deal with that scoundrel, right? We've all been there, all of us. Whether it's that was you, or you've had to deal with someone like that, and then perhaps later on in life, they obey the gospel. And they have to work on transforming themselves and changing. That's going to take time. It's not going to be an overnight fix, by the way. But here's the thing. How do we encourage them? How do we build them up? Folks like that who find themselves, who were in their former manner of life, their old life, they were not trustworthy. But now, the gospel's been preached to them. They've obeyed the gospel. And now they're trying to make heaven their home. They're trying to walk down the straight and narrow path. What are we going to do to try to help them in their walk? And this goes down to eliminating all corrupt speech. Because our speech is going to do one or two things. It's either going to lift up, and it's going to encourage, it's going to edify, or it's going to tear down. It's going to destroy. That's the one of two things our speech is going to do. Our speech is either going to produce life or it's going to produce death. There is no in between. And so in these moments, what are we doing? What kind of balance do we have in our communication? Because we have to always speak the truth. Always, no matter what. But can we speak the truth in a bad way?
Yep. A lot of times it's not necessarily what you say, it's how you say it.
That's right.
Sometimes, yes, you should always tell the truth, but sometimes just to focus on these things doesn't mean doing the right thing. Because you could be telling the truth to someone, but depending on how you say it, it could negatively affect them or make the situation worse.
Okay.
So, yeah, it really depends on how you say it. Sometimes, like, if you're not saying it in a good way, you might as well not say it at all.
Right. So we have to be careful with that principle. If you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. And it's like, well, truth is always good, but it goes back to how do we communicate it? How do we say it? And so, like, one thing I would say is that truth without love, I mean, that's just brutality, is what that is. If you don't have true love for your fellow man, you don't care about what happens to them, not just physically, we're talking about spiritually and emotionally. On that's psychology-like level. They're affecting their psyche.
Psychological.
Right. So that's going to play a role and have an effect on their spirituality. Now, it's not an excuse, and it's not a good excuse, but the reality is, and I'm sure some of us have maybe experienced this, where you've heard someone say, well, they were just so hateful to me when they were telling me this, that, and the other. And so let me throw out this word, legalism. That's something that we have to be very careful and guard against. Because if we start focusing and honing in on things that ultimately that God doesn't focus and hone in on, but we build up our traditions, we build up our practices, and we say that those things are more important than God's commands, how are people going to view us? They're going to say, well, they're just like the Pharisees. They're just like the scribes. But, practically, Has anyone in here, and don't be ashamed to admit this, have you ever said, I'm just telling it like it is? No hands? One hand, two hands? Oh. I'm sorry?
I don't remember
You
if
don't,
I've ever said that.
you've slept since then? Maybe you haven't said it verbatim specifically like I'm just, but maybe you've said something along those lines. You know, I'm just telling it like it is. You know how that comes off? How does that come off to you? Let's be honest. Let's do practicals for tonight. Anybody?
Don't want to hear it.
Don't want to hear it?
Well, so it's going to depend on who we're talking about, circumstance. That's just such a vague question because it's going to, who am I talking to? Am I talking to a mature Christian? Am I talking to a babe? Or, you know, so there's a lot coming into play when you're trying to, or you're speaking the truth to someone who is falling on the stony grounds of their heart and is not receptive to it, and their response is not necessarily because it was spoken wrong, it was received wrong
Yeah.
by some people. So there's a lot of variations in it.
There is. But I just across the board though, like if people are watching and like, let me tell you, like cell phone videos, everybody's got a cell phone, right? And like, you know, I know law enforcement examples, some people don't like it, but like police officers, they wear body cams and they're supposed to be on the whole time at an incident, right? Well, what happens is sometimes people come up to an incident, but they're 15 minutes late and they're recording from their perspective what they are seeing in their perspective, not in that officer's, in his bird eye view, but from their view. How are people going to portray it when all they hear is you know, we just come off and spout off, well, it is what it is. It doesn't have to be specifically that, but it comes off as rude. And so it's just the manner in which sometimes we need to consider, and I agree with Mark, we can nuance this, you know, and we have to nuance this, but it would literally take all class and next Sunday, and like we can nuance this to death. It is circumstantial. But just because we have the right to say something, okay, we need to figure out a way to say it in a way that's not going to be skewed, where it's not going to be misinterpreted. We have to help people in their understanding because, in like your couple examples, are we talking to a mature Christian? Are we talking to a rational individual? Are we talking to a kid? Are we talking to someone who's a babe in Christ? I mean, it just, obviously the circumstance is going to help develop all of these things, but these are things that we have to be accountable to, because I think the passage is Matthew 12. It's going to be near the end of the chapter. Matthew 12, verse 34. You brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak what is good? For the mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart. The good man brings out of his good treasure what is good, and the evil man brings out of his evil treasure what is evil. But I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they shall give an accounting for it on the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. And so this is something that we're going to have to work on daily. This is something that we're not going to, we don't have perfect scientific blueprints that says, okay, for this situation you do this. We just don't have that. We have to figure out how to navigate through life and do it faithfully to God while living this way. So the truth, right, finding this balance, the truth has to be spoken with love, with wisdom, right? Timing. Sometimes we have to see, is this the time? Is this the place? Is this the right opportunity? I'm not saying we shy away from the truth. That's not what I'm saying. This is part of that nuance. Again, we can nuance this to death. Is this that right time to go at it with somebody? And so these are things we have to consider. We have to be careful that we just don't fall victim to the adage of, well, this is just the way it is, and this is the way it's going to be. I want to strongly caution you to not allow that to be your driving force. Think about difficult conversations. How many difficult conversations do we avoid? Be honest. A lot of them, all of them, as many as we can. Yeah, that's true. That's true for a lot of people. And obviously, again, circumstances are going to play into that. I mean, I think for a lot of us, though, we realize and recognize that life is hard. It's difficult. And timing plays a role. But sometimes we have to learn, if we don't have those difficult conversations, who will? And so, like, my encouragement to you all, because, I mean, for the majority of folks in here, you're here almost all of the time. All of the time. I'd rather you be out there influencing folks for the gospel's sake, telling people about Jesus. I'm not saying you have to do it like a preacher, but show people how you live than them getting their influence from worldly people. Be willing to go through those difficult conversations, because you just never know who you're going to influence. You have no idea the life that you might change because you took the 5, 10, 15 minutes, however long it was, to sit down with them and say, let's have this discussion. Let's talk about this. Let's work through this. Because a lot of times what the world says is well, you just don't do that. You just go through. If you don't like them and you can't find a way to do it, you just go your separate paths and you move on. And we see how well that's worked out in relationships. Folks getting married and then 3 months later getting divorced. Not just 3 months, but, a year down the road, well, I'm going to go find someone else who's better for me. I mean, it's a vicious cycle that just keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. And it's not working. And it affects them spiritually because they move on. And then they still have those same problems. And they haven't sorted out those problems. They haven't learned how to communicate. Bill, did you have something?
I think I heard a preacher say one time, you better make your words sweet because you may have to eat them.
That wasn't me. So.
I don't remember who it was, but it did stick.
That's
You're
right.
talking about difficult conversations. Are you talking about someone that you know maybe that they have sin in their life, or what you perceive to be sin in your life? So that's what you're talking about. Difficult situations.
That could fall under that umbrella, yes.
So what else would you have a difficult conversation about?
Perhaps.
I mean, a lot of, that gets into a very sticky situation where you don't know what you're talking about, I know.
That could be. It could just be, you and your spouse are not seeing eye to eye, and your marriage is on the rocks, you know. And perhaps both, husband and wife they've just been avoidant of trying to come together and investigate why they've been struggling. They haven't communicated at all. I would say that one of them coming to the other and saying, hey, we need to sit down, we need to talk through this, I think that's going to be a difficult, challenging conversation. Because perhaps for however long they've been married, they haven't done that. So I think that would be a difficult conversation. Could be a parent going to an adult child who no longer lives under their roof, but that parent still feels obligated to try to influence their child. Maybe it's the child going to the parent and saying, hey, I'm not agreeing with what you're doing and your decisions, and they're trying to find a way to honor their father and their mother, but I think there could be a whole host of I don't think it's just related to someone's being in sin. I think it could just be a whole lot of things. Does that make sense?
You need to know what you're talking about before you start, doing because sometimes when you get into a conversation like that, that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you just think you know what you're talking about,
It's going to be
that is loose.
it's going to be apparent. But it's kind of, so, okay, I pulled James and, Dale. I don't know why his name left me. I had pulled James and Dale aside because I had received a phone call this afternoon on the office phone. And I said, I did my spiel, Hazel Street Church of Christ, how may I help you? And it was a guy, and he said his name was Dion, and the first thing he said after saying his name was I'm suicidal. And so, like, in my head, I'm like, oh boy. And he was very reluctant to really give me much information. I was trying to investigate, just, well, what's your last name? Where are you at? What's going on? And ultimately, he's looking for money for a bus fare, is what he said. And so I had just said, well, where are you at? Just trying to, if he's really needing money for a bus, then okay, I'll take care of that. That's not a problem. Well, no, I don't want it that way. I want you to use this. He said an app. It wasn't PayPal or it was something else. And, I said, you want to do it your way and whatnot. But, it quickly went from I'm suicidal to I just want money. And so some people, they would have heard that word suicide and they would have panicked. But, with me, with my background, you start investigating and asking certain questions to try to navigate through, okay, is this legitimate or not? It turns out it really quickly, within 2 or 3 minutes, it wasn't legitimate. Well,
I would have said, where your funeral gonna be at? I got the suit ready.
Well, I'd rather the leadership not find out that the preacher said that to somebody. I can only imagine, Lee, you're called in for a preacher's meeting. No, but you're right in that, if we don't know much about a particular subject, then how do we handle that? I think in some instances you have to do the best you can. Because if you won't have those conversations, like if it's like to save your marriage, like let's just go over to the spousal side. If you won't talk to your wife, who will? And so that question is directed to the men. But it can be flipped to the women too. If you won't talk to your husband, who will? the greatest influence that some people have is going to be those that's closest to them. And so the only way to do it is to kind of just rip that Band-Aid off and finding a way to break the ice. Maybe that's a better way to put it instead of saying rip the Band-Aid off. But finding a way, because it could be something, we've never done that before. Right? You've never said, hey, we need to sit down, we need to have a heart-to-heart. So how do you handle that? Okay.
Early in my life that I had a big mouth, and I'm going to say what's on my mind.
Mark, get out. I'm trying to pay attention to this wonderful woman, and you're making faces.
No, it's just something, I love to talk, and I knew that as you became an adult, now this is before you become a Christian, you get into situations because of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And saying things.
Yeah.
And, and I had to sit down one day and accept that about myself. I said, well, I'm going to say what's on my mind. I knew that.
Yeah.
But I gave it to God to direct me in what I say and how I say it a long time ago.
Bill. So what did that look like for you, though, in the beginning? Because I think we all have to learn practically, because we're all different, but sometimes, we're visual learners. We learn through what we hear. So what did that look like for you, that type of training? Because it wasn't overnight.
No.
But saying you gave it over to God, I mean, yeah, awesome. But, like...
Just going through situations, reminding you of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Getting into situations, having to get out of those situations
Yeah.
because of what you said. A lot of it, because we do that to ourselves,
Yeah.
whether we want to admit it or not.
Accountability is hard.
Yes, it is. But that was something that I had to, for me, I can say,
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn over a period of time. And I could see where, over a period of time, it became better and better. Because I said, I won't have a husband if I don't learn to shut my mouth.
We get there.
I won't.
Y'all heard me tell him to get out, right?
You just got to have that, that type of peace
Yeah.
within yourself. Waiting, and you said timing.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that has a lot to do with, it's how we say it too, but timing of when you say something.
Yeah. So you pick and choose your battles.
Yeah, they say that.
Yeah. Another one is I'll lose this battle, but I'm not going to lose the war.
Yeah, you can say that.
Yeah.
But timing, I think too, is a lot of it.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say that.
No, I appreciate that. I think that type of, whether you want to call it witness or testimony or just openness, that's going to help us. That helps everybody in the room, because that shows us that we're not perfect people. We're all walking and journeying through life together, and we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. I mean, Mark's made it abundantly clear, and I mean, you guys have known Mark for however many years. I mean, he's...
Let me say this. In certain incidents, you just got to say it.
Yeah.
You spend so much time trying to go around and sugarcoat it, when if you just say it and let it take its effect, everybody ain't going to be happy when you tell them the truth. But it says here in Colossians, it just said it, let it be with grace. What do we mean when let it be with grace? Well, first, before you approach these people, you're only going to do it for one or two reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Because you didn't experience it, and you seeing where they're going,
Mm-hmm.
and you can give them a warning. And
Yeah.
the other one is, what is my state of mind? Remember when you were that way? That's the greatest. So you want to enter it that way. See, because, man, I've talked to a lot of people around the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I've met all kinds. I mean, different nationalities. children. All relationships is built and sustained. You heard me say it before. On trust. Do I trust you?
Yeah.
And then if you trust me, our conversation ain't gonna always be agreeable, but because we trust each other, we'll be able to disagree and still walk in love.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when that trust is broken down, okay, how do you...
How soon can you forget it?
Yeah.
Because if you carrying the weight of that distrust, that's gonna be on you.
Yeah.
How soon can you forgive? And I've experienced that as soon as you can forgive and move on, you lift that weight and you can move on. Truthfully forgive people.
Yeah.
And don't go, well, I remember when.
Yeah.
Some women are really good at that. I said some women.
I think there's some people about broke their neck when they're flipping around on him. So let's get to the angry part. Let's be angry and sin not. So just don't kill him. But do we all understand that anger itself isn't sinful? Anger itself is not sinful. Is it selfish, right? Is it coming from a self-serving perspective? Is it, is it rooted in bitterness because you're holding on to something? Or is it rooted in holiness? That's the difference between Jesus. He didn't come to be served. He came to serve. Everything he did was to accomplish the will of God the Father. Everything. And so, when he displayed anger, as we'd call it righteous anger, right? He did it through the pursuit of holiness. Who gave you the right to turn my Father's house into this den of robbers? They got all these money exchangers and everything. And it's supposed to be a house of what? Prayer. Yet, again, they've completely abused the model. And so, he wasn't angry from a selfish point of view. He wasn't angry because he was prideful. It wasn't of personal offense. Think of it that way. And if anybody had the right to be offended, it was Jesus. But, what ends up happening is with our anger, it's typically driven through pride, ego. Our preferences are being stepped on or maligned. And the thing about anger is there's two kinds of anger. There's external anger and there's internal anger. Right? External's easy to see because you see it happening. That person has blown a gasket, right? They've blown their top. They've exploded. But then you've got some who, and perhaps because you know them, it's like, oh, they're angry. Because they've suppressed it, right? They've internalized it. And so on one hand, you've got the one who explodes. So there's yelling, there's anger, there's profanity, there's passive-aggressive behavior, there's sarcasm, threats of violence, right? That's that outburst. That's the external anger. And they don't even necessarily have to hit with fists, but they've launched so many verbal grenades, they're just trying to blow up anything and everything by the things that they're saying. So we know that that's not a route that we can go down. But I want to caution you to not think of this way in that, well, if I internalize it, that's not as bad. I don't think that's very smart. I don't think that's wise. I don't even think that's biblical. When you think about the idea of bitterness, resentment, I believe that those are sins. When you bring something in and you hold it in and you hold that grudge, what is it that the Hebrew writer says? He says, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay," when he's quoting from the Old Testament in referencing God and his punishment, that he will repay those who have wronged you, who have committed misdeeds, committed sins. God's going to take care of that. He will have the vengeance. You don't need to seek out that vengeance. But what happens is that bitterness that builds within us, that's anger that stayed within you for way too long. And, there's really no good way of saying this. You just have to come up with a lot of examples for yourself, but sometimes that happens when you have questions in life and you're not given direct answers. So, why did my wife divorce me? I don't know. Perhaps you may never know. And so you build up that resentment within you. That's just one example. There can be a whole host of them. We have to figure out a way to not allow that internal anger to build up within us to cause us to be bitter, to be just cold. Have you ever just met someone who's they're not pleasant to be around. They're just cold. They're rude. It's not very fun. And I don't think that's how we should portray ourselves. That passage comes from, obviously, Ephesians 4, verse 26. Be angry and yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity. Well, I've actually heard people say that that a husband and wife, if they've had a disagreement, they've had a little tiff, that they have to stay up all night in order to work out that thing. I think there'd be a lot of people losing a lot of sleep. Sometimes, by the end of the day, I speak this from experience. I have 4 children. I'm delirious by the time I'm ready to go to bed. I'm sure my wife is. And I know some of you other parents who had children, you were perhaps so tired sometimes you couldn't think straight. You go to bed and you wake up and everything is hunky-dory. And then you're able to have that conversation to work out, right? I don't think this is a principle to say, don't go to sleep until you figure out all your problems, because you're not going to solve the world's problems before you go to sleep. They're still going to be there. But I think this is trying to get us to understand, don't nurture that anger. Don't allow that to continue on that next day and then hold on through the next day and then the next day and then the next day. That's where resentment builds up. Don't feed that resentment. Don't cherish the hostility. That goes over to grudge keepers. I'm sure we could name the world's greatest grudge keeper. And you know what? They cherish that grudge. They enjoy it. They feed off of it. Don't be like that. Don't feed off of your anger. I think that's what he's trying to get us to see. But I want you to think about your children. And for many of you, even your grandchildren. Think about the influence you're leaving them. Are you giving them are you setting a positive role model for them to look at, to see? Kids, they're resilient, but they recognize when there's a stressful moment. The tension that we say that we can, you walk into the room, you can just cut it with a butter knife. Do you know that kids see it too? They recognize it. They're not dumb. What do they see you do? And more often than not, they're going to respond just the same way that you do. Especially if you are the person that they are around each and every day. So you have to think about your influence. Eliminate all corrupt speech. I'm trying to speed through this real quick. Drop down to verse 29. here in Ephesians 4. Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. Okay? So, unwholesome, corrupt. Don't let this proceed. And so he's saying, let a word come out that's only good for what? Edification, for building up. So he's not just saying don't say bad things. That's not what he's saying. That he has said that. That's not only what he said. He's saying we need to use speech that builds up, that encourages. So, who here's enjoy being around a negative Nelly? Anybody? You love being someone who's always critical, and I'm not talking about just not, they give out criticism every once in a while. I'm talking about they are overly critical. Like they walk around with a magnifying glass to find your problem and to let you know about it. That's why I tell people I don't need any help getting in trouble. I will let you know when I'm in trouble. But this idea that the Greek word actually is carrying is that this corrupt language, it will rotten the relationship. It will cause it to decay. It will destroy it. It's destructive kind of language. So again, that constant. I mean, you can never say anything nice. Just always overly critical. Always ridiculing, always mocking people, gossip, slander, cutting jokes. I'm not talking about like funny ha-ha jokes. Like they're literally they're being bullies. Is more the idea. Think of it this way. I want to say this before we close. Sometimes people speak more kindly and nicer to strangers than they do their own families. And if that's the case, I think this is a moment where we can reflect. If I'm talking nicer to the neighbor down the road than I am to my children or to my spouse or to my mother or whoever, that's a problem. That's something that's worth thinking about, that's worth discussing. I think sometimes familiarity breeds contempt. It causes us to stop guarding against who we're talking to or with. Because, oh, well, that's just Lee. And so think about the passage that talks about fathers, do not discourage your children. Right? Isn't that over? That's
Provoke them to wrath.
Yeah, don't provoke them to wrath. Do you think that could be because they're so familiar with their children? It's just like, I'm going to put you under my thumb. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but I think we need to stop and think about the dangers of how we communicate. And we could communicate either life and goodness, or we can communicate death and destruction. And so I think Mark made a good point earlier. We have to be careful that we're not just trying to sugarcoat everything. But we do need to be mindful of the circumstance. If someone's teaching false doctrine, those are good moments to say, no, that's not what the Bible teaches. It says this, right? But there's a way to go about doing it. And we have to make sure that we're willing to do that.
On that, I got my suit ready for your funeral. That's reverse psychology.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen people wake up and they change their conversation when they say that because they're now looking at reality. Wait a minute, I'm saying I'm about to kill myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a scary thing. And I don't know, I've had that in the family, and I've seen it happen. It's a scary thing.
It is. Absolutely. Because nowadays you just don't know what people are going to do. And people are, when they make that decision, they've made it. They bought it, they paid for it, and then it is what it is. So, okay, well, let's take this moment for next minute. Yield not to temptation. We are tempted each and every day of our life. Some more so than others. And some things are not as hard, not as difficult to deal with, and then other times there are other things that are really pressing, and we just feel like we're being weighed down. We're carrying this really heavy backpack, not a literal backpack, but just overburdened. And so we need to be thinking about our life and what we give into. We know the will. We study it just about every time we get together. My hope and prayer is that you guys are, when you're at home and you're thinking and talking about God's will and His life for you, His purpose, and that you're considering your ways, reflecting each and every day. And so that's what I want us to do tonight. I want us to reflect. If there's something that's tempting you and you've been struggling, you've been giving in, tonight we can rectify that. Let us be, I don't want to say a crutch, but let us be that shoulder that you can lean in on and that you can talk with and that you can have a discussion and that we can try to encourage you, because we're here to serve one another. We're all, I hope, going to make it to heaven. And we're going to be going together.
I think we all have issues and problems, but I appreciate Sister over there who said that she had to work on her problem. I think we all have been too courage for her to stand up and say, I had problems, I had to work on it. And we can like she did, pray over when we have issues that should affect us. And it took courage for her to say that, because many of us having problems and we didn't want to say it, but you know it. And she took firmness, so that's all. It's all coming out to her about issues and pray over each other together.
That's right. And so that's what we want to do for you tonight. So if there's someone who needs to obey the gospel, the baptistry is ready. We can, if you're willing to make the good confession that Jesus is the Christ, then we will baptize you in the water for the remission of your sins. If you've already done that, you need the prayers of the congregation, then we want to help you with that too. So won't you come forward as we stand and sing 905.